Hi guys, my name is Lauren and welcome to the Omnivorous Bookworm. Today we're going to be talking about The Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. It's the second story in the Earthseed duology. It was written a few years after The Parable of the Sower. I will link my Parable of the Sower review down below if you would like to watch that one as well, since it's the #1 book. But this is the second and final book in the Earth Seed duology. It was written, or published, I should say, in 1998, so like about 5 years after The Parable of the Sower. And the story takes place in the 2030s, kind of, mostly. I gave this book 4.5 stars, the same as I gave The Parable of the Sower. I felt like the ending was maybe not as strong. It was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. But the ending for The Parable of the Sower was really, really good. But overall, my enjoyment of the book was I think a little bit higher overall, like for most of the book. And it's well written. It's a classic. Yeah. So to get into it, you definitely do need to read The Parable of the Sower first before you get into The Parable of the Talents, because it is definitely a continuation of the story. I was looking at the history of this book when I was going to do this video, and actually Octavia Butler had intended for this to be a trilogy, but unfortunately she passed away before she was able to complete the third book. But we do have, there's like some samples of her writing where she was trying to write the third book and like couldn't, or was struggling with it. So we know that she definitely did intend that and wanted to have a third book, but it didn't get done. But it's kind of encouraging in some ways. It's like even Octavia Butler like struggles to accomplish things, like as amazing as she is. So, yeah, it's of course it's sad though. Like I wish we had the third book, but anyway. So this is the second book, and it's in a similar format. So we have journal entries that have been compiled by the journal entries that are written by Lauren Olamina, who was our main character in Parable of the Sower, as well as her husband, her brother, and her daughter. And the book does have a really long period of time, but like I said, most of the book takes place in the late 2020s, 2030s, kind of. That's where most of it, and it basically picks up where we left off in Parable of the Sower. It is very so we have the same world. We have this dystopian sci-fi world. Again, there's not a ton of sci-fi like physical elements, not a ton of like sci-fi technology. If that's what you're looking for, it's not really there. This is more of like just a dystopian book about ideas, and more like a political sort of dystopian speculative novel. That's kind of how I would describe it if somebody. So it's very unique, and very poignant. Like we start to wonder if Octavia Butler really was a prophet. So the main character, Lauren Olamina, she has this theology, or philosophy, I should say, called Earthseed, which is basically kind of like if you wanted to make humanism like a concrete philosophy around humanism, and then add some like religious elements to make people more comfortable, or like to give people the feeling of like religion without sacrificing your core beliefs. Like you're still kind of humanist. They don't call it that, but I mean it's very similar to that. But you have like people who are called shapers. You have sort of their Sunday meetings are more like lectures with discussions. It's sort of that kind of thing. They have, I think, ceremonies for the children, but of course there's not really a religious significance behind it. It's more like to give people the ceremonies and the symbolism of religion without actually having the theology, if that makes sense. And she even talks about in the book that like she's really big on, like, she wants to be accurate, she wants to be honest, she feels that all of these things that she has compiled are true and verifiable, and things that she has witnessed and things that you can pull together from reality. But they are living in this really awful world, and she does admit it at points in the book that, like, she, obviously agrees with her philosophy and she thinks it's important, but it's not always the most comforting when people are really struggling, because she doesn't really have a lot to offer. So, like, they'll say that God is change, which is also kind of another interesting thing, because it's like, I mean, if they call God change, then they believe in God. But, like, I don't know. It brings up a lot of philosophical questions that are pretty interesting, to think about, and what she's trying to do in this world. So the world, like I said in Parable of the Sower, is just collapsed because of climate change and drugs. Yeah, that's mostly it. And it's like really collapsed. Like, there's no schools, there's, no police, no fire department, like, not really. Yeah, all the state borders have become militarized. It's just a mess. Like, it's horrible, a mess, really, really bad. And then in the midst of this, we have this man running for president, and it's very interesting. I vaguely remember, like, a few years ago, people discussing this book, but I think with all the noise, I just didn't pay attention. And so when I was reading the book, I wasn't aware of this part, and so it was really shocking for me. So, but anyway, I have a quote here. I don't usually get quotes, but I think it's important, in this instance. So they're talking about this guy who's running for president in this fictitious, future U.S., and this is the man talking. He says, "Leave your sinful past behind and become one of us. Help us to make America great again." He's had notable success with this carrot and stick approach. Join us and thrive, or whatever happens to you, as he's had to distance himself from the worst of his followers, but he still knows how to rouse his rabble. I think my quote is a little messed up, but anyway, that is a quote. So we have this guy who's running for president in the U.S. He creates this new denomination. It's like called the Christian American denomination. So it's very, like, Christian nationalistic. Yeah. And his slogan for president is "Make America Great Again." So, and this was written in 1998. So Octavia Butler was pretty, I don't know. I think she was pretty, she was a prophet. I don't know what else to say. But it's very interesting. So we have this guy. He's very fundamentalist Christian nationalist. Uh, he's targeting religious minorities, anybody who's different. We know the story. And so the way I'm going to sort of handle this book, because, like, it is a sequel, so there's no way I can't, like, not do any type of spoiler. But I also don't want to, like, get into a lot of spoilers, because I know a lot of people might be interested in this book for various reasons. So I'm not going to get into any of the plot points or any of the, like, actually what's happening to the characters, but I am going to talk about this world and things that are happening in this world to, like, sort of paint a picture. And so some of those things may or may not be happening to some, if or all, or none of the characters. Well, it wouldn't be none, would it? But just to sort of talk about the world and the ideas. So I felt like that was the best way to handle it. So in this world, with this president-elect, we have these re-education camps. So people who are different for whatever reason, or have broken the law by being vagrants or being homeless, uh, are imprisoned. And it's a type of slavery. So it's a combination, like, the slavery that they have in this world is like a combination of, like, the old chattel slavery that the U.S. used to have, and the type of slavery that exists today in imprisoning people and using their labor and things of that nature. So it's like a combination of the two. They wear these, like, they have to wear these, like, collars that are really horrible that make them do things in order to control them. Just like within Parable of the Sower, this book is really intense. It has every type of abuse and horrible thing that you could do, like one person could do to another. So like spiritual abuse, physical abuse, everything, yes, everything horrible. It is, I feel like, I mean, I didn't count the pages, but I definitely feel like it's a smaller percentage of the book that we have all these horrible things happening than Parable of the Sower, but it's still really bad. It's still really intense. Yeah, it's there. It's all there. So yeah, if that is anything that might be upsetting to you, is probably in this book. I mean, it's a lot. Um, so we have these horrible re-education camps. Um, we have these people that are very fundamentalist Christian, that are like controlling and taking over these things, and the guy who's like the main guy, he will say that he doesn't agree with like the abuse and the violence, but he doesn't really do anything to stop it. So that sounds pretty familiar as well, unfortunately. Um, and we do have also like technology mentioned, and it's kind of funny because all the technology that's mentioned is very physical. Like everything is extremely like physical things, which just feels really 90s. Like they watch the news, but it's like on a physical disc, like that you would put in something. Uh, yeah, it's just they have the big satellite phones, and it's kind of funny. So as far as some of the things that didn't work as well for me in this book, like I said, I think it's really good. It's well written. It's very engaging. It's very intense. But there were just certain things that like didn't work as well. I I had the same problem that I had in Parable of the Sower, where the world has collapsed, but I feel like certain things have collapsed and then other things have stayed, and it doesn't always make sense to me, like how one thing is still here but this other thing is gone. So for one example is like there's no schools, there's like no type of public schools, um but we have like air traffic controllers, and people are still like taking flights, and I don't know, it was just a little odd. Like didn't always make sense to me, like why something existed and why something else didn't. um there's no police, there's no firefighters, or like none really to speak of that don't work. So I'm like, if the firefighters aren't, like, if you can't trust them, like, why are you trusting the air traffic controllers? So that seems a little scary. Um, and some of the other things, I feel like this is a little, I'm not even sure if this is a fair criticism, but I'll say it because that's how I felt. With the Christian American denomination that they have, it felt like, and except for the case of one character that is a little bit different, mostly all the characters in this denomination are just a little bit too mustache twirly evil for me. And I just had a hard time believing, like, in this world where everything is collapsed, like, wouldn't there be some more people who maybe have good intentions, maybe they're good people, but they're just misguided and they think that they're doing the right thing, but it's just not. Um, so I don't know. That was just, it was a little thing, and I think there could be valid pushback for me on that one, but that was just how I felt when I was reading it. Um, and then let's see. Oh, and then when we have people going into this fundamentalist denomination, it just seems very fast that they're going in and out of this like fundamentalism, which for a lot of people is a very difficult process, especially if you're raised. Well, I think that's dealt with a little bit better. But if somebody becomes a fundamentalist as an adult, I mean, it makes sense in this world that people will be searching for anything to help them, anything that they feel like would give them any type of hope. But it also feels like they're just coming in and out of it very quickly sometimes, not always. But usually that's a pretty intense process for somebody to go through it. I've known of people that, to come, if they, to come out of that sort of mindset can take years of like deconstructing and figuring out, so what was real, what wasn't, what can I really base things on? And it can be sort of a long process. So it seems not as realistic to have sort of people dipping in and out. But overall, this book is very poignant, very, with the presidential candidate, you know, is exactly like Trump. I'm glad I didn't read this. Well, he's worse than Trump. It's like Trump with Pence and maybe Ted Cruz. Like if they became one person, is pretty scary. But I'm glad I didn't read this book a few years ago. I think it would be a lot more upsetting. But it it is true that that kind of stuff is like whoa. And then with the re-education camps, and we do have that happening right now in China with the Uyghurs, that a lot of people are in these re-education camps because they are, religious minorities, and it's very upsetting. But I also think, and I don't know how, I don't think this is very helpful, but like it's true that it's shocking how accurate Octavia Butler is, but it's also a reminder of like all this stuff that we're dealing with is just stuff that was here in the 90s and before, and it's like gets sort of our new reiteration, but the moral majority and all that stuff has just unfortunately has been around for a while. So that was a little bit depressing with this book. But I definitely think it's a classic. I think um, it would probably be too intense to read with high schoolers. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty intense. But I think it would definitely be a great book to read, with university students, and not just for literature classes, but like for political science classes, or just to think about the ramifications of certain things, especially how they talk about climate change. I think her climate change is a little bit simplified in a lot of ways, but I mean, it's okay. Like, you know, it's only a 300-page book. We can't get into all the specifics of everything. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. If you think you can handle the intensity of it, I would definitely recommend it. But read The Parable of the Sower first. So, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. I'm a brand new channel, so every new subscriber is very important to me. So thank you for watching. Bye-bye.